let's turn to our final discussion and look at what can be done now to learn from this crisis to help developing countries respond to the next pandemic. Are there lessons that could strengthen resilience and help countries better prepare for future shocks? I'm joined now by a truly esteemed panel. Ngozi Okonjo Iweala is the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Dr. Richard Hatchett is CEO of CEPI, which stands for the Center for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. Dr. Gro Brundtland is the co-chair of the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, former Prime Minister of Norway, as well as former Director General of the World Health Organization. And Mari Pangestu is Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships at the World Bank. Welcome to you all. Ngozi, first to you and congratulations on your new position as head of the World Trade Organization. You were selected to head the WTO in February of this year, almost 1 year after the pandemic began. What do you see as the greatest economic impacts that developing countries are bearing during this global crisis?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for congratulating me. Let me just say that before we talk of economic impact, we have to look at the health impact, because the biggest thing for economic recovery for developing countries is getting the vaccines that they need in order to deal with the pandemic. I often say the biggest economic stimulus for developing countries would be access to these vaccines. So that's the first. But developing countries have been hit in so many ways. Commodity exporters have faced plummeting prices. Travel and tourism for those countries that depend on this has collapsed in many countries. And even those well integrated into global value chains, they've suffered from some of the closures of factories and borders and so on. So there's been a lot of impact on developing countries. And as you can see, for 36 years, poverty has been declining. From a figure of about 3 decades now, poverty has been declining. And in 1990, 36% of people were living in extreme poverty. Now, in 2018, this fell quite substantially to about 10%. And now, for the first time, it's climbing back up. And the World Bank projects that 150 million people could fall back into poverty. So you can see how the impact of this has really been very dramatic.
Following up on what we've heard and going forward, how can we strengthen the global economic architecture to better prepare against future shocks?
Well, thank you so much. I'd like to make 4 points on this. I think that the first is that we should have a better preparedness and response system in place. And when I talk about preparedness, I'm talking about surveillance and early warning systems, whether we are talking of pandemics or diseases, or whether we are talking even of climate change related kind of disasters. The world needs to invest in surveillance so that we can get early warning. So that's the first. I think the second point is that we should put together a financing framework that would help us deal with finance both the preparedness part, but also finance the response in case we don't get the warning on time. And what is very difficult now in the world is the fact that preparedness is probably a tiny percentage, maybe 1% of the monies we spend on response. If you look at the trillions of dollars we spent in this pandemic, just responding to the health and economic issues, if we had spent maybe 100 or 200 billion on preparedness before that, we would have been better off. So we need to put together a sensible financing framework. And I think that the third point I'd like to make is that we need to keep supply chains open. Of course, coming from the trade side, I would say that, but we've seen that trade has helped us manage this pandemic and has made the economic impact perhaps better able for governments to handle than it would have been, even the health impact, because we've been able to move through trade medicines, vaccines, PPEs from one country to the other. So keeping supply chains open is a very important part of the response. So those 3 points I think are vital for us to be better prepared next time and safeguard our economic systems better.